Hi, welcome back to another bite-sized battle report for the 2 Plus podcast. We're looking at a game I played last weekend in the Sydney Standard, 1,500 points, Chaos Dwarfs versus Lizardmen with Geoff's Chaos Dwarves, and hopefully we'll have Geoff on soon just to talk about Chaos Dwarfs in general, which are everyone's favorite rare army, I suppose, in the new edition. So I went over to Geoff's to play this game. And you'll see from the top, while I'll post the lists in the notes below, that he has 3 Bull Centaurs with a champion, has about 20 Infernal Guard with a BSB and the Lamassu Beard banner that gives a ward and magic resistance to the unit and to nearby units. It gives a save against shooting and a softer magic resistance. Behind it, there's a Sorcerer Prophet on a Lamassu with Talisman of Protection, Mantle of Stone, rolled up I think, +1 strength for the Dark Forge weapon, running Demonology. So very powerful character and fun to play against, I think. Also fun to the right, an Iron Demon. Um, so, you know, just hard to describe what an Iron Demon does, but just the moving Hellblaster slash heavy chariot. And that rep might not really showcase it at its full potential, but certainly a unique and distinctive thing in the Warhammer world. But beyond that, he had Sneaky Gits ambushing too, which will turn up on the second turn. For me, I was running 10 Saurus flat, no upgrades, 10 Temple Guard, no upgrades, and 10 Scouting Skinks with Javelins and Shields. You can see to the right. So these 2 other infantry units were set up in marching column, and you might have seen my earlier video where I go into detail about what I was trying to do there that was relatively successful in this game. To the left of them, there's a Bastiladon with the beam, a Troglodyte, and a Carnosaur, a Scar-Vet on Carnosaur, who's got the Armour of Meteoric Iron, a great weapon, and the Talisman of Protection. Behind them, there's a Slann running. I was running Necromancy in this game. This was sort of the last lore I wanted to try. I took the lore familiar, and he was a battle standard bearer as well. I wasn't running the highest state of consciousness for ethereal for a change. I took the regen discipline of the old ones to give a 5+5+ save. And I chose the spells that the leadership debuff spells, hoping that my terror causing units would have some effect there. I also picked up Curse of Years and Unquiet Spirits. So yeah, that's how we deployed. Geoff was going first, and from there, we'll just have a look to try to move through this. We're going to have a look just at the first turn. Not a lot happens. Geoff goes first on the left, moves forward, takes off a couple of skinks with the pivot from the Iron Demon, and on the right, I've moved up, angling my Carnosaur so that the Bull Centaurs will have to charge it in the flank. The skinks are moving around the Iron Demon just to sort of stay out of the arc while peppering it with ineffective poison at the moment. The Temple Guard make march up. So I redressed the Saurus into ranks behind them because there wasn't going to be much action or they'd be caught in the crossfire to the left. And I've given space for the Trog and the Bastiladon to march in there too, shielded from the Bull Centaurs by the Carnosaur. You can see the spell I've managed to cast Glittering Robe on the Trog Rider, and the Slann is just sitting in there in the pocket trying to cast spells. In that first combat, where after that, I'd taken an Itxi Grub to see how it went, the +3 casting, and tried to land a Vortex in between the Temple Guard and the Infernal Guard. I think he needed to roll a 12, and Geoff promptly did, which sort of meant my Temple Guard were going to be a lot more vulnerable. So that's sort of a snapshot of where it was, and you can see some of the spells that Geoff had got off earlier sitting in the background. Just to go backwards, what happens on Geoff's next turn is he does get he gets 3 charges off. He gets the Bull Centaurs into the side of the Carnosaur. You can see faintly in the background, I wish I'd got a better picture, but the Lamassu goes straight in for the Trog from great distance, and the Infernal Guard pick up that charge on the Temple Guard in marching column. So in this combat, the Geoff didn't challenge, I did. and the Carnosaur was able the Scar-Vet. I can't remember who did it, but I won by 2 in the end. And we've made a video here. Hopefully you've seen it by now, but ultimately we didn't think you had to give ground off the table, and I think we were wrong. So the the Bull Centaurs passed both tests for the break tests, and we just had to give ground, but it would have pushed them off the table, as you can see from the right. And interestingly, I suppose the Carnosaur, now frenzied, would have to follow up, which might have taken it off the table as well, though looking at that 2 inches, maybe not, but it certainly would have been facing the wrong way, which is something that plagues the Carnosaur and keeps it out of that very top range of units. Behind them, incredibly, the Lamsu and Sorcerer Prophet lost to the Trog. I think they did 1 wound and the Trog did 2 backwards. So I love the Troglodon. I think everyone loves the Troglodon, but it's been pretty weak so far. I'm starting to warm up to it, and this game was a good example where it's been it was more than a C in my mind. So yeah, won the combat, and the Lamassu rider, well, the Sorcerer Prophet, extraordinarily is stubborn as well, so he fell back in good order. What that meant was that the Troglodon was able to jump into that next combat and fight again because it was an established combat where the Temple Guard lost their front 2 ranks, but the Troglodon did a wound. They still lost, and I used Stubborn on both the Troglodon and the Temple Guard to fall back in good order. What that meant was, as you can see on the right, I was able to reform with the Temple Guard into a single rank where their 2 attacks were very, very useful for the remainder of the game. So that although they lost that first combat, it was a good result for me, and they pushed backwards, and I was in pretty good shape there in the middle, to tell you the truth, especially as you can see that Sorcerer Prophet has sat behind, and I thought, well, if I can win here or it's in the Carnosaur's arc, I might get lucky. From there, what you can see, so the Sneaky Gits arrived early. Had no idea how good they were. Ballistic skill 4, and specifically, I can't remember which throwing weapon they have, but it gave them multiple shots and quick shot. So they're getting 20 attacks off, and were able to take 4 wounds from the Slann with some pretty good rolling. 5+5+ saves, pretty good. I think he's still saving on probably over half of each wound. But I guess I probably had been a little bit too cavalier, and the Slann ended up on 1 wound, and me wishing for that ethereal back again. So that was there. I also just have put up a slide from later because you'll see the Saurus don't do a lot in this game, which is pretty typical for them. But the Sneaky Gits on a later turn were also able to take off 7 Saurus in 1 round, which was extraordinary. So pretty good. I think for Geoff, this was a game where he was trying out those Sneaky Gits, and they, for 60 points, I know, and he'll agree here, that they had to come on early, but Ballistic Skill 4 is a big difference, and that multiple shots was able to really put a lot of pressure on me and sort of kept me from running riot with the Slann, to tell you the truth, later on. Most of the game as well, too, the Skinks on that right flank are just encircling this Iron Demon and moving slowly to the middle. So against low toughness targets or low armor targets, Skinks are great at winning that attrition war because they're just cheaper and they can get out more damage. But against highly armored targets or tougher armies, where they excel is just getting in the way. And in this instance, that's what was happening. Geoff, I think, probably said later that it was a mistake for him to have the Iron Demon out in that wing. I mean, I'm not sure what else he could have done. I was going to deploy later, my monsters later than that Iron Demon, really, I think, whatever happened. So I was always going to try to hide them from it, at least for the first couple of turns. In this sense, the Skinks never did a wound to it, but were able to just keep it occupied, which for 60 points versus 270. So it was another great day for the Skinks, and they remain by far, well, not by far, we'll get to my review of Lizardmen at some point soon, but they remain point for point, just an incredible offer, especially for a core unit. So on the right, I've just left those double sixes there because later on, it was also later on, there was also an opportunity here for Geoff to dispel one of my undeath spirits on his Tzatziki Gits who have leadership 5 and probably would have ripped them to pieces, but again rolled a double 6 to stop it from going off. So these things happen. I think I certainly roll well at times and it evens out in the end, but those little moments make great stories. And this was one where the Slann was running for its life the whole game and was certainly, as a Necromancer, not particularly efficient. So in the middle, just to get back to that combat, on the left-hand side, you can see that pretty much everybody gets in on the Infernal Guard. The Carnosaur makes it across and sort of ends that combat, but I think the Bastiladon was probably providing enough to make that happen. That's one of the disappointing things with Carnosaurs, I suppose, that they really are quite good, even without flying, and I am opposed to the Old Blood. I think this build is the second best thing after Skinks in the army, and I'll get to that in a full review later on. But the ability, big monsters just being able to restrain and reform is one of the big things that's going on in this format, and the Carnosaur can't do that in the end game and becomes not a liability. It still tears things to shreds, but you just can't target things like other big ridden monsters can, or even just get away, as a lot of combats break apart through fallback in good order or give ground. So in this instance, you can see that the Saurus aren't really doing much. The Temple Guard are whittling them down. After this combat, they're broken, and the Temple Guard being to the right and them having to pursue away from the Carnosaur means that they were caught very easily. And I'm left with that awkward result on the right-hand side, the 3 wounds on the Troglodon, but the Carnosaur sitting right in the middle because it has to pursue, sorry, it had to go directly forwards in this instance, and even going there for Swiss Stride didn't really make it very far. So what you see there is that's the great moment where the Slann, I had got it out of there, marched away from out of the range of the 9-inch weapon that the sneaky gits were using to attack. But unfortunately, that Iron Demon behind the house had a line of sight on the Slann because I turned the next turn and not fully marched out of range to try to cast that Quiet Spirits. And in this sense, I was able to. The Iron Demon did 2 unsaved wounds, but I was able to save both of them on the first roll with regen and live. Because I think at this point, if the Slann had gone down for 400 or so points, it might have been very close. What ends up happening in the middle is the Lamassu charges in to those Saurus and Bastiladon and actually wins by killing those Saurus, and then is able to get out of that combat as my Carnosaur is facing the wrong way. And in the later game, turns around, reforms, and charges those skinks, which is the incredible difference between those things. The Lamassu, which is hardly a combat powerhouse, unlike the Carnosaur, but the mobility just meant it can be efficient and go after small targets and control the board. Also, though, you do get these problems where in the first round it just whiffs completely against a Troglodon, but then lastly, in this combat, has just smashed 3 Saurus Warriors and won that combat easily. So it's pretty variable when you're just rolling to hit on 3 pluses. Ultimately, I win the game here. I'm able to finish everything else off. The Lamassu is still around, and the Iron Demon is there, but the Slann is able to march to safety behind a house that was in my deployment zone and just hang out there until the end of the game. Getting the Infernal Castellan, the Infernal Guard, the Sneaky Gits, and the Bull Centaurs. The Sneaky Gits essentially died in the end to accommodate a combination of Spirit Leech taking a leadership test down, and then when they fled, there was a Temple Guard left that was able to run it down before it itself died to spells from the Lamassu. So in that way, I got the Seeker Gits, the Bull Centaurs, the BSB Castellan, and Geoff ended up getting my Skinks, the Saurus, the Temple Guard, and the Troglodon, who bravely went down in the end, but took a lot of damage to get there. So I was pretty happy with its performance. I guess my takeaways from this game, it was a fascinating game. I'm nearly at the point of feeling like it's sort of write a strategy guide on Lizardmen. I've sort of got the 5 best units for sure, and there are probably the 5 worst units. But in the middle, just figuring out that, look, I think Temple Guard are the sort of default pick, that taking just 10 of them with nothing else, and they're 2 attacks and stubborn. And in this game, it wasn't the Halberds, it was the ability to use that -1 AP weapon, but also carry a 4+ save. Because that sort of comes in at under 200 points, it's not a bad investment. You know, you march up, take a hit. It's really stubborn that makes them good. I'll be fascinated to see if the Saurus can pull their weight in a similar maneuver. But ultimately, it really relies on that marching column turning into a fallback in good order, which then turns you into a line, which gives you the more attacks to fight back without those rank bonuses or standards to help you out. I do think that a standard, and you can probably see there from the points that I won from Geoff, standards may be a liability in this edition. They're too easy to claim, and you're just giving away points. On top of that, I guess just in general, Lizardmen, I find a mentally taxing army to play, unlike, say, Warriors of Chaos, because you come out of the gates really hard. The Skinks are very good early, and your opponent, you know, if they want to have a whinge, they're going to feel under the pump, and the Skinks get in the back, and they don't get away with much early on that they can get it. They do, but there really lacks a lot of late game punch in the army. The Carnosaur is just unreliable. It minces things, and it's certainly like with the ability to do D3 wounds to monsters, the strength 7, it's incredible, but you just can't control those second, even third combats as well as like Griffin Riders even can that are out there. So in this instance, for me, it's hard to play, but what I'm finding is that you want to really rely on that stubborn, the redundancy in the large monsters, and they generally have stubborn as well as terror. It just provides that you just got to take that hit and then combo charge with a few things, including even the Slann, who I'm thinking like ultimately the BSB is pretty important. Rerolling leadership tests really sometimes makes them a lock to pass above leadership. At leadership 9 reroll is over 95% in getting it right. And I think on top of that, just throwing in with close order and BSB really have swung a lot of combats with the Slann joining in the flank. So the takeaway there, Temple Guard are good, stubborn is really good, needing to take that hit. And ultimately, you just, with the Slann, Necromancy was rubbish. I found High Magic to be rubbish. There's just too many things that you need to go right. They tend to be combo type spells. So for me, the Slann has to be a bit more offensive. I did find Plague of Rust really useful against, I think AP modifiers are sometimes lacking in the Lizardmen army, especially with the Skinks running around offering mass shooting. It could be a very good combination. And travel mystical pathway is excellent because you're often out deployed. There's not a lot of 5 model units that you can drop that are cheap. So changing the various flanking or flank positioning of units is critical. However, you can't, with the way Lore Familiar works in the errata, you don't really get that 4th spell that battle magic gives you where you get Hammer Hand that just helps on top of Pillar, Fireball, and whatever battle magic spell I'm forgetting, but there's definitely 4 battle magic spells. Arcane Urgency. I think on top of that, Illusion is useful, obviously, against dragons, Miasmic Mirage, and Spectral Doppelganger, but it's a bit of a trap too. Like there's a lot that has to go right there. And as I move into playing High Elves soon, having that re-roll to get off Doppelganger feels like, and Miasmic Mirage just feels like such a luxury compared to what the Lizardmen can put together with their overall weaker legacy PDF. So yeah, like getting there, I think maybe a game or two more just to figure out where those remaining points go at 1,500, which is what we're playing in Sydney, or even at 2,000, which I'm playing casually on Friday nights a lot of the time. I think that, yeah, I should be able to write something soon where I think Lizardmen are a really great army, really underrated in this edition. And I think on top of that, are quite acquirable. The models tend to be pretty available, not just through the AOS range, but on the secondary market. So thanks to Geoff. We'll get him on. This was at his place. He's done some wonderful prints for the Chaos Dwarves. And I hope for him, he realized the sneaky kits were really good. And he's just got to find something to pad out that middle to get what's a relatively small army back in shape again for the next tournament. All right. Thanks for watching again. And we'll see you next time.